must have followed that through because you're very good at evaluating your projects. You talked about the success of 16 getting in the first summer school. Yeah. What does it look like now?
We're up to something like 10,000 students have been through our summer school specifically. And we're looking at something like between 25 and 30% are offered places by the university where they were at summer school, which I think is a tremendous achievement. Yeah.
And do you think the culture in universities has changed a bit as a result?
Oh, it's changed a lot. I mean, universities are now, from 10 years ago, which is when I set up the trust, the Oxford attitude was universal. It's like, it's not our problem if they don't apply.
We've got students that
we've
serve as well.
We've got good students anyway. Whereas now, all universities are now engaged in outreach and funding bursaries for students. So I think the climate has changed a lot. Yeah.
There's some other things you've done that perhaps we don't accept yet as part of the mainstream of a child's experience. And I wanted to talk about what I always call your Belvedere experiment. Sure. Belvedere, an independent girls' school in Liverpool. Talk us through that project, why you did it, what happened, what's been achieved.
Well, I think... as I said, when I came up through the system, the vast majority of independent day schools were effectively part of the state sector through the direct grant scheme. Most of the places at those schools were free, and it provided lots of opportunities. So it occurred to me that actually that whole resource of independent day schools, which used to be available to all children, is now only available to 10%, roughly, of those whose parents can afford the fees. So we got together with the Girls' Day School Trust, who are the largest owner of girls' schools in the country, and we picked their school in Liverpool, which is the Belvedere School. And we said, this was nearly 10 years ago now, or 7 or 8 years ago, we said, look, anyone that gets into the school gets funded. And we did much more than that. We did a lot of outreach. We got girls from all sorts of backgrounds to apply. Applications went from 130 to 400. We changed the admissions procedure from a maths and English test. We had a verbal and non-verbal reasoning test. So we opened up the school. And the way it works is that children who get in who require funding then have a means test. And depending on their income and assets.
So the test is wealth blind.
It is what the Americans call needs blind. Yeah. So the scheme ran for 7 years, and 30% were on free places, came from family income of less than about $14,000 a year. 40% paying partial fees, and 30% paying full fees. So we had a terrific social mix.
A huge social mix.
Fantastic social mix. And the academic standards in the school went up enormously too, that we got brighter girls in who were able to benefit from that education. And the interesting thing is, because we, which is the Girls' Day School Trust and the Sutton's Trust, were funding about 55 to 60% of the fees. The fees at the school were just over $8,000, so it was costing us $4,500 a year. This is in the last year, and which is less than the full cost of a state school place. So we'd actually opened up a very academic school, private school, in a very economic way. So the reason we did it was as a demonstration project to try and persuade government to increase the numbers of schools. And originally we said 12, but the vision is that it would be 100 or more schools. So it would actually remove the advantage which upper middle class people have, which is they actually have access to these schools, which the vast majority of people don't.
Was there a reaction in Belvedere from those families in Liverpool who might have thought, well, my daughter gets to 11, I'll pay for her to go to Belvedere, and all of a sudden they found she couldn't get in because she couldn't compete academically?
Well, there were obviously some parents that were displaced, but what they ended up doing in practice, we haven't done the scientific study of this, but we know anecdotally, some of them actually ended up going to state schools, which is no bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing. And the majority ended up going to less academic independent schools. I mean, there's a choice in Liverpool as there is anywhere else. So we displaced them from actually the most academic school in Liverpool to less academic, which I think is a good thing.
You do have this view, I sense, that if we're to do the best for our most able children, whatever their backgrounds, they do better if they're educated with other children, with children of similar intellectual ability or attainment.
Look, if we could just wipe the slate clean, Estelle, I would be all for getting rid of all grammar schools, getting rid of all private schools, and doing what, I was in Sweden and Finland earlier this year, and doing what they do.
They perform very well, according to
They perform very well, and everyone, by and large, goes to state schools. I mean, private schools just aren't a factor, and I think that is very healthy. But I'm above all a pragmatist, and what we've got to realise is that private schools are here, they're selective, grammar schools are here and selective. They're not going to go away. I mean, Labour government over 10 years didn't do anything about grammar schools. We are where we are, so what we would like to do is really democratise selection, is to say, look, it's not just the top 10% of income that can go to these highly selective schools with highly qualified teachers, but that we make them available to 100% of the population.
You've very much specialised, haven't you, in that area of education?
Well, I think people ask me, what is the Sutton Trust? Well, we're a charity, we fund projects. And as you said earlier, we've funded over 30 research studies, so we're a bit like a think tank. But what we really are, what I like to think we are, is that we are a do tank. Yeah. We do things that we think make sense, we evaluate them very carefully, and then we try and persuade others, mainly government, at the end of the day, to pick them, to take them up.
Let's go on to that, because
Sure.
You've mentioned government a number of times, and that's what I like about what you do, because I think we're quite good in this country at doing one-offs. Government's very good at doing one-offs, pilots, and they never come to anything. Even if they work, there's not the resource to take it forward. And you've always had that attitude. You've formed a close relationship with ministers over the time of the Sutton Trust, because you want to mainstream the successful things of what you do.
The big one has been trying to do something about the whole state-independent divide, and that's politically been very difficult.
What's it like working with politicians? I mean, you are a doer. You like to call yourself a do-tank. One can almost imagine your frustration at the civil service and government, the machinery of government being very slow to respond to what you say, and yet you have achieved with them a great deal. So how do you find working with government and politicians?
I find it very interesting. I mean, the big problem is that it's just the changing faces in that group. I think, actually, I've dealt with... I started my trust under the Conservatives, and I think there have been 7 Secretaries of State for Education,
in a decade.
You were one of them.
Yes.
In a decade. So the real frustration is that you form a relationship with somebody, and then they move off and somebody else is coming in. So I've been constantly having to establish credentials with new people the whole time. And actually, to be honest, it's no way to run a business, and education should be run more efficiently than it is.
Do they ask you to trial things? Does it work that way around?
There's been some of that, yes. I mean,
do it under your name? And
I mean, we're trialling, for instance, at the moment, we're trialling something called choice advisors, which is advisors in local authorities to advise children on where to go next, and the government approached us. And we've just been asked to look at the whole issue of university admissions from comprehensives in poor areas, and they've asked us to actually do a review of that and come up with some trials.
So they're actually asking you to do the research and then come up with
some solutions. But more often it's things that we initiate.
You've also been around long enough to sort of see different government policies, and that's even under the same government. So I suspect, as you say, you started the trust at the end of the Conservatives when we had GM schools, and then under Labour you've almost been through the standards not structures, back to parental choice, diversity, city academies,
there's always
now
new
into
initiatives.
Every Child Matters. I know, but looking back over that, I mean, things change, and those have been themes. But do you think we're making progress? Are we a better education system than when you set up the Sutton Trust?
I think actually, and we've got some research to back this up. I think, in terms of overall standards, we've done okay as a country. We may have improved a bit relative to other countries, but not hugely.
Sort of a marginal.
Exactly. So that's okay. The big disappointment has been social mobility and social justice. I think it's been very disappointing in 10 years of a Labour government, over 10 years, that not more has been done for children from less privileged backgrounds in terms of their opportunities. So I'm an optimist that things are going to get better, but I'm also a realist, and this is a very difficult thing to tackle. We're swimming upstream. There's a lot of vested interest in the status quo. You know, everyone wants to do the best for their children, and parents that have financial means will use them further their children's interests to the detriment of other children. So that's a very difficult thing for governments to tackle.
Let me put, I suppose, what the government would say in response to that, that to some extent the only way we'll solve this is to improve the quality of teaching in all schools. And I know it's not your responsibility, but the argument against what you're doing, I suppose, would be you're taking some of the bright children, you're taking them out of a school and giving them a set of circumstances where we know they will succeed. And you've done well for them, but from a government's point of view, that can't be a national education system because you've got, 60% left behind.
Well, I think, look, the bigger agenda is to take children from really less privileged backgrounds and less able backgrounds and give them a great opportunity. I mean, take the Belvedere example. You say, hey, we're taking all these children out of the state sector. Every year in the catchment area of Belvedere, which is Merseyside, it's wider than Liverpool, there are 10,000 children that go from primary to secondary. 50, we have a class of 70 or 72. 50 of those children come to Belvedere because they can now afford it. So we're taking 50 children out of 10,000. That's not a lot. No. And these children are actually very bright, Estelle. We're probably talking about top 2 to 3%.
Top 2 to 3%.
And I feel really good about the fact that I know all those girls are going to go to university. They're all going to be given a really good chance. So these are really able girls. The so-called creaming off effect is actually very small. It doesn't really have a big impact. And we didn't have any problems in Liverpool. There wasn't a huge hue and cry from all the secondary schools saying, you can't do this because we're losing all our brightest children.
Which used to happen under the grammar schools because it was 25%.
Yeah, but that's a different thing. We're not talking about going back to a wholly selective system. Yes. We're saying there are these excellent schools in every urban area. There are private days, independent day schools, and in rural areas. You could actually, we've looked at it, you cover the whole country with these schools. And they would be schools for actually quite able children.
Peter, you had 20 years sort of in business doing, which sounds less interesting than the things we've spoken about. But I was going to ask you sort of, just to finish up, which has fulfilled you more? Which of those two bits of your lives have you enjoyed most?
Estelle, it was absolutely thrilling for me to set up my own business, and I came very close to not making it. I was, after 18 months, I think I was technically bankrupt, but my accounting system was so bad I didn't realise it. So I kept on going anyway. And eventually things turned around for me. That was very exciting. And then I started this thing, as I told you, just based on wanting to be helpful. But this thing has been amazingly fulfilling. I mean,
it's full time for you.
Oh, it's full time. I mean, the first year we did the Belvedere scheme, I mean, I had tears running down my eyes because all these girls came into the school, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, getting this amazing opportunity. And it's really, and the number of letters we get and the children I meet on our summer schools,
for a long time.
Yeah, and it's just so fulfilling, just to be doing good things. And then the other thing, of course, if you do something and then government takes it up, that of course is also very fulfilling.
Sir Peter Lampole, thank you very much for being with us today.
Lovely.